Fans of sci-fi wargaming, resin-cast armoured vehicles and gigantic bipedal war machines, thank you very much for joining me for a model and build review of this intriguing looking miniature. Well, I say it's a miniature, I should maybe call it a maxi-miniature because it's quite large, but this is the Cutlass Class Warstrider, which is from a company called Battlecastings, and those of you who follow the channel will remember I did an unboxing video of this recently. Yes, it is now built, it is magnetized, it is ready to review, and that is what we're going to do in this video. So firstly, as I said in the unboxing video, this miniature was supplied to me as a review sample by John Lander, who runs Battlecastings. So as usually in my reviews, I'll show you the miniature, I'll tell you what I think is good. If I see bad things, I'll also point those out as well. But please do bear that in mind when considering the opinions I offer in this video. Here we have the full layout of all the different components and options that come in this kit, and there are quite a few, as you can see. So we have the actual Strider itself, and then we have a whole set of options around its arm weapons, its head, and the carapace mount. And just to quickly run through those, we have this rotary barreled cannon, we have this long cannon, we have this melting cannon, we have a large battle hand, we have a activated chain cutting sword, we have a multi-launcher which fits on the carapace, we have the tri-spire, and then we also have, bless it, the mono-spire. In addition to that, we have 5 heads. So we have one that is currently tacked on, and then we have these 4 down here. So that's a quick overview of what comes in the kit, and quite a good selection. So what we'll do now is I'm going to whip all these away, and we'll come back to look at those in a little bit. But first I want to show you around the model. Here is the actual model itself. This is a large size miniature. I'll show you a scale comparison later on as well. We will do a couple of size comparisons against other models. And yeah, I think it's a handsome looking model. If we have a look at it a bit closer up, one of the things I pointed out in my unboxing video was some of the polygon counts on the weapons seeming relatively low. You can see that I've done some sanding work to smooth these off. I was contacted by John, who said since I did the unboxing video and some of the feedback in the comment section, he has increased the polygon count on some of the weapons. So hopefully things like these artifacts, and particularly on the long cannon, these will be less visible, although I don't have one of those to show you, so I'm only telling you what I've heard, so I can't really evaluate that in a quantitative manner. On the original unboxing, you'll remember that I said that this was mold slipped, and you will remember that. John sent me a replacement, and I had it in a few days. This one was spot on, no quality issues at all there. Now that bit of housekeeping is done, let's have a look at this guy some more. The style of this is definitely a retro-styled miniature based on the themes of techno-fantasy wargaming from the late 80s and early 90s, I think I would say. It's very much like an armor cast model in terms of the detail level and the general feel of it. That is my perception of this kit. And for those of you who don't know Armorcast, it was a licensed company which manufactured miniatures based on Games Workshop's Epic range, and they were active in the 90s out in the US, and they've since gone out of business. Yeah, this is very much of a homage to that design. I think I'd say the detail level is decent. It's not highly detailed at all. Depending on what your tastes are, I think it's probably good enough. But let me touch a bit more on the kit quality. I mean, in terms of cleanup, I mean, there was a reasonable amount of cleanup to do. Probably no more than I've come across in certain Forge World models in the past. The resin is something new to me. So this was a low VOC, low volatile organic compound resin. So hopefully something that has less of an environmental impact to cast. It worked okay. I mean, it filed nicely. It cut okay. It's a bit harder and more brittle than, say, forge-walled resin, but it was decent to work with. No complaints there. There's quite a lot of air bubbles to fill. You'll probably see some here and there. There was one. A bit of trim work there on that shoulder block, bit of filling there. Overall, not too bad at all. On the other weapons, we do a little bits of filling here and there to do. Yeah, and I'm doing this just to restore the quality of the finish. Overall, the kit quality was adequate. It wasn't stellar, but it wasn't terrible. The other thing about the general makeup of the kit was it was really easy to build. There's only a few parts to this. There's 2 feet, 2 lower legs, 2 upper legs, a waist and hip unit, a torso, 2 shoulder blocks, and then the head and arms. So it's pretty straightforward as something to assemble. I put it together quite quickly, actually, once I'd got it all cleaned up. So let's talk a little bit about some of these weapon options. In the instructions, it recommends that you use 6x3mm neodymium magnets. So I got N52 grade ones, and I recessed them into the joints. I mean, this took a bit of careful drilling work to do, as you can see there. And then the same on those. And then into the shoulder block, I also mounted the same type of magnet. But those give a decent hold, and I think you'll be pretty much, happy with using those magnets. You could put a little bit of glue or something around the rim of these just to create a tighter fit if you wished. But that is an option you could go for there. So reasonably easy to magnetize, although these mounting points are fairly small. If they were perhaps a millimetre or 2 wider, they will be a lot easier to put a magnet into. At that size, should I say, 6x3mm magnet. In terms of magnetization, let me show you the weapons. So we'll take out the rotating cannon. I mean, a bit rough on the finish there on the rotating cannon, as you can see. I mean, I did a fair amount of cleanup on these. I could have done more. On this one, I wasn't going for a perfect finish like I normally do on some models, but I hope you can get a feel for it. The melting cannon. I drilled the barrels out on all the weapons just a little bit more than they were cast. They were cast drilled out. I just increased that a bit. Yeah, that's cool. I've got this, which is a long cannon. I was quite taken by its long, thin design. Interesting contrast to a large, hefty melee weapon. Talking of melee weapons, if you want, you can go full-on close combat like that. The rotating chain bladed saw, that will mount on either the left or right shoulder, but the battle fist will only go on the left-hand side. But you can do it that way. If you do it that way, you're a bit short on range weapons. You've got this secondary heavy machine gun weapon. I've not done it yet, but you could drill the barrel out on that if you wanted. You've only got that. So what you could do is you could remove the tri-spire and replace it with this multi-launcher, so multi-rocket launcher. And that drops in there. I use small magnets for these. These were, I think, were these 3 or 4mm? These were, not before. So yeah, if you're going for that particular loadout, you could go with the rocket on its carapace for some long-range firepower. So it's not entirely armed for melee. And likewise as well, we can just whip these weapons away and we can go for a full maximum ranged loadout. Again, like with the Battle Fist here, the rotating barrel cannon can only go on the right-hand side. But the other weapons, I mean, I suppose you could put this on the other side. but because of the ammo feed, it looks a bit weird. On this, I did heat bend the resin to get the ammo feeds to hang down as if they're under the influence of gravity. This does heat bend this resin, but it's got nowhere near the flexibility in it of, say, a Forge World model. You need to heat the parts up more and you'll have less bend. But it can be done, and on these small parts it was actually all right. That was okay there. A bigger bit, I did need to heat this up to straighten the barrel out a bit and straighten this ammo hopper out. That took a bit of work. It was quite hefty manipulating. And you could also put melting cannon on there as well. Let's talk a little bit about the build, a bit more about the build. So I said it was straightforward, which it was. I'll just take this head off. So this is what the actual torso looks like with the weapons removed. There's not many parts to it. I'll tell you what I did. So I pinned the major joints. I put a pin in the knees. Because while they've got a big ball and socket joint, I was worried that the contact areas weren't smooth enough or flush enough. So I did put a pin in there. The ankles I just glued. They have a very smooth, a very flush fitting ball and socket joint. What I did there is I roughed up the surface of the ball and the socket with my modelling spiker bradawl, just to give the glue extra surface to grab onto. So I did that. The legs, I did the same thing again with roughing up the surfaces of the ball and socket joint. These fit pretty well. I then stuck them. Then I use these little, I don't know what it's supposed to be, but these little almost like motive pins or something. But I actually drilled a pin in through that. You can see that there. And I did a decent length pin in there. So it's nice and strong. I then just capped it off with a little bit of glue so it's smooth. Just cutting the pin so it sits slightly below the level of the detail. So that's what I did there. I put a pin in the waist. There's a really substantial socket joint here. It didn't need a pin to actually hold it for strength. But I put a pin in which just helped me with posing it, because it meant I could drop this on the top, work on the leg positions with the pose with having this here. So that was quite handy. The gun, I mean, you can mount this on either side, but it fit there. That's fine. I think it looks best in my eyes on this side, on the left, but you do have a mounting point on the right there as well. The shoulder blocks, so these, I just stuck them. There's a big square or diamond shaped mounting block, one for each side, so you know which shoulder block is supposed to go on each side. I wanted to get a bit of motion in, and you can see how they're slightly off center. So I wanted to make the model look more dynamic. To do that, I just cut about 1 millimeter off each corner on the block, and that just gave it enough flexibility to be able to rotate it. So that worked well. And yeah, I just stuck them in place, plenty strong there. And that was the build. So very straightforward. And the trade-off here with having less detail is the simplicity of building it, and I suppose painting it. It is very easy to do. And if you're normally a bit nervous about doing large, complicated resin models because of how difficult they are to put together, then obviously this has something to offer in an easier to put together kit. Let's look a bit more at the options. So we've talked about the carapace options. The third option is this, which I just call the monospire, which I think is very cute, how it just drops in there. Let's put some weapons back on, and this time I think we'll go with the melting cannon and the rotating chain activated sword. So helmets, we'll start with this one. This is one of the 5 heads, you get 5. I've just tacked these at the moment, so I don't know quite what. I'm going to give this to a friend, and I don't know quite if he wants a head sticking on or if he wants to magnetise them, so I just tacked them for a moment. They would easily magnetise. Very cool head. Those of you who were into comics in the 80s may remember Nemesis Warlock, and I think this helmet is paying homage to some of the helmet designs of that comic strip. I really like that one. That's brilliant. Next, we've got a mechanical skull. That sits quite deep into the recess. It doesn't stand out as much. Has a quite a menacing aspect to it. Perhaps if you were creating an army or a model that was a follower of a dark mechanical god, that could be a good choice. Another variation on the Meccano skull. Pretty cool, eh? This one's nice. This is a very retro design. A very retro mechanical knight design. I do like that one. That's cool. I might have left that on for the rest of the review, if not for the next head we're going to look at, which I absolutely love, and it's this one. If I were going to give this helmet a name, I would call it the Lord of War. Yeah, very cool. I think if this was my model, I would have that head on it. What should we put on now? Should we put back the... let's put back the tri-spire. I like the tri-spire. So there's a look around the model, its weapons, and how I magnetise those and how I built it. Now let's do a size comparison. Just because I've got one to hand, we'll have a Space Marine, and this is a Space Marine from Forge World. And this is a Mark III Despoiler Marine of the Night Lords Legion, Legio 8. This is part of a large mission I'm building at the moment. And as you can see, this is a Titanic-sized unit. Not a big Titanic-sized unit, but, you know, like a junior-sized Titanic-sized unit. It is a big model, and there are a whole host of games where you could use this miniature for such a unit in an army. Now, I don't have a junior-sized Titanic unit to show you, but I do have this guy here, which is the Mechanicum Knight Atropos, which is a absolutely fantastic model by Forge World with its wonderful detailing. And there's two reasons I've chosen this model. Firstly is for its size, to give a view against that one. But secondly, to emphasize a point which I was talking about with kit complexity. The Atropos is an absolutely amazing model with very fine details and huge options. However, it does need quite a bit of skill to put it together. So there's an interesting contrast there in terms of the kit style as well as the size. And size-wise, we can see that a Cutlass Warstrider is definitely in the same size category as the Atropos, but it's not quite as big as the Cerastus platform. So plenty of ideas there for how you could use the Cutlass in your techno-fantasy wargaming. So there you have it. Let's bring the weapons back into view, and then I'll make some concluding remarks. Well, there you have it, the Cutlass Class Warstrider from Battlecastings.com. A large resin kit with lots of options and this very characteristic retro design. So what do I think of it? Well, overall, actually, I was pleasantly surprised. When I unboxed it, I was a little bit on the fence as to how it might look when it would be finished. But having done some cleanup, filled it up a bit, and then actually built it, my opinion has shifted somewhat. And I'm really rather fond of this model now. While it clearly doesn't have the intricate detail of top miniature brands these days, it does have that all-important characteristic of character. And, you know, without a shadow of a doubt, there's a lot of character to this miniature. There's some beautiful nods to historic designs. Let's call them homages. There's some lovely homages to the late 80s and early 90s of techno-fantasy wargaming. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I don't think there's many models of that type available now, certainly to buy as a kit ready to build. And if you are interested in that sort of thing, and you know, I've seen a lot of these retro designs, and there just seems to be more and more at the moment. Here you've got something in a class of its own if you're wanting to represent this large robotic style battle walker in your games. So yes, I do like that. I think the options are great. So for $80, I think that's a very good value. In terms of the service I've received, well, obviously, as I said, this was a sample, but when I did have an issue, John very quickly sent me out a replacement service, and it was a very quick replacement as well. So that was a good experience for me as a reviewer. It's also very easy to build. It's not a complicated model, although you do need a bit of skill with doing the pinning and a few tools for that. On the downsides, well, the casting quality in places isn't super sharp. There's some bits where you probably need to do a fair bit of cleanup to get it nice and smooth. Although if you're just going straight for painting, and particularly airbrushing, then some of those features won't show up, I don't think. Probably my biggest criticism of this model is the polygon count on the 3D model, which has come through in the final thing in places. So that is something to consider. I think it's good what John's already done in increasing the polygon count on some of these round-shaped weapons. And who knows, maybe he might refine the design further in the future as he develops his business, because this is his first model. Yeah, something to consider if you are looking to buy one of these. Those are all my observations and thoughts on the Cutlass Class Warstrider from Battlecastings.com. I'd once again like to thank John Lander for sending this model to me for review and build purposes. I've had some fun with it, had a lot of fun with it. And as always, I'd like to hear what you boys and girls have to say about this model in the comments section. So please do share your thoughts there. I'll be very interested to hear. But other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.